Welcome, everyone. We are especially delighted to be in person, to see so many of you here in the fellowship hall, which has been home to PW meetings for so many years. It feels very good to be back. And we thank Brick for getting us all set up and for being able to live stream this for those who can't be with us tonight. I wanted to open with a poem. You know how things happen in a timely way. Our Circle 7 met last night at Southampton Recreation Association under the stars. Mark and I were talking when he first got here. It was quite different. People had stadium blankets and folding chairs, but it was still lovely to be together. And Kay Grinnan and Mary Garrison, who are chairs of Circle 7, put together a little snack for us. And on the snack was this poem by Jan Richardson. And I just thought it was a nice touch for this evening. It's called Blessed is the One. Blessed is the one who comes to us by the way of love poured out with abandon. Blessed is the one who walks toward us by the way of grace that holds us fast. Blessed is the one who calls us to follow in the way of blessing, in the path of joy. And again, that's by Jan Richardson. Well, it feels funny to start the April meeting and immediately talk about what's going to happen in May, but there are certain things that this is a meeting in addition to our wonderful program that's to follow. So I do have a couple of business matters to address. Annual Day will be happening on May 17th, and God willing, we will be in this room eating an actual meal. You may remember that Annual Day is when the council members prepare yummy salads and the circles provide even yummier desserts. So all are invited. We will be starting in the sanctuary, and we're going to do that at 11:30. My hope is that that will help us avoid the preschool dismissal time slot and get everybody in for the meeting, and then by the time we have finished lunch, the little ones will have gone home, and so there won't be any sort of traffic congestion. So that's why we'll start at 11:30 in the sanctuary and then move in here for lunch. Typically, at our April meeting, we would be collecting the Presbyterian of the James PW birthday offering, but we're going to do that at the May luncheon as well, and your circle leaders will probably remind you of that fact. The other thing at that event, you know that we recognized Honorary Life Award recipients for 2020 and 2021 via video and then Zoom, all thanks to Brick and his talent. So we do still have a little bit of special business with those ladies as far as presenting their actual certificates and their pins to them. So at this year's annual meeting, we will be recognizing Nancy Gottwald and Connie Gottwald, Eleanor Darden, and we're inviting Irene Owen's family. Hopefully her daughter will be able to come, and possibly Duncan as well. And then this year's recipient or recipients. So it will be a time for grand celebration and an opportunity for you to applaud these ladies and all of their efforts. The other thing we need to do at this April meeting, and I think Elizabeth Hiles had intended to be here. She's the nominating chair for PW, but in her absence, I will present the slate of officers for 2022, 2024, and I'll need a motion to accept the slate, and then we'll vote very quickly, and then I can turn it over to our program. A number of these people have most graciously agreed to re-up in their current position or take on a different role, and we're especially grateful. Barbara Glenn will remain as historian, Judy Price as one of our registrars, Susan Douglas, corresponding secretary. Melissa Mintz is shifting hats for the umpteenth time, and she will be the nominating committee chair. Cheryl Phillips will come on as a new member of the council and try to fill Miranda Reynolds' shoes as program committee chair. I'm going to transition to membership chair, and will be delighted to hand the reins or the gavel or whatever to Kim Lewis as your new moderator. So if someone would entertain a motion that we accept that slate of officers, we can be done with our business. All in favor? Aye. Wonderful, thank you. And the only other thing that I'll say before I turn it over to Neely Barnhart, who's our chair of the day, is that we know some of you need to slip out, whether it's for choir or to meet carpools for risk. We've already given our wonderful speaker, Mark Ramsey, a heads up, so he knows not to be offended and think that you have taken exception to something he said, or you're tired of listening, or whatever. So he understands that people have places to be. So Neely, without further ado, I'll turn it over to you.
Mark Ramsey is the executive director of the Ministry Collaborative, which is under the Macedonian Ministry Foundation. Their purpose is to equip ministry and leaders for sustainable ministry through collaboration, exploration, and innovation. They offer the support to move forward in the direction God is calling them. He has served as senior pastor in churches in Austin, Texas, Asheville, North Carolina, Oak Park, Illinois, Denver, Colorado, and East Lansing, Michigan, as well as starting ordained ministry as an associate pastor in Bethesda, Maryland. While in Asheville, he participated in a 3-year clergy cohort sponsored by Macedonian Ministry. He's been a preacher for Montreat Conference Center's Summer Worship Series and for Day One. He is an associate editor and frequent contributor to Journal for Preachers and has written selections for Feasting on the Gospels and Connections. He currently serves on the Board of Trustees of Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary. A special passion right now is working with a group of scholars and pastors funded by the Louisville Institute on the challenges of race, church, and theological practice. Mark finds this time in the church life exhilarating and challenging all at the same time. He speaks and leads retreats often for clergy groups, church boards, and congregations. A native of Central Illinois, he is a proud graduate of UVA and also received his MDiv from Princeton Theological Seminary. So our speaker tonight is Mark Ramsey.
Yeah. Wow, we're in person, no mask. What do you know? I don't know how to act. I hope I can remember how to do this. It's great to be with you. What I'd like to do today is, and if you have, I've got 3 texts. We may not get to the last one, but I'm preaching on it in May, so that'll just be coming attractions, I guess, if I don't get to it. I have a great job, as Neely was sort of outlining there. I did write that exhilarating part before the pandemic. I'm a little less exhilarated like everyone else now. Today, I have talked to 2 groups of clergy. By the way, we're at 1,000 churches and 23 denominations. I talked to 2 groups of clergy in northern Iowa and southern Minnesota. Average size of their congregation is about 40. One woman who was in one of the groups said she's in her last 3 weeks because her small Baptist church in southern Minnesota is closing, which is not an unusual thing these days. Then I'm not only on the board of Austin Seminary, but I'm also on the presidential search committee. And we got to talk to a candidate today, and that was interesting to get a glimpse of where theological education is. Now I get to talk to you all, but this I get to do in person, so that's terrific. If you've got this, what I want to do is take a look at, and I know Neely and I had 6 titles for this thing, and this is the real one, okay? What does Easter have to do with the future of the church? What I find is often we think, well, there's Easter, and then once Easter's over, we'll get back to the business of the church. Actually, if everything we do in church doesn't flow into everything in church, then why do it? And I actually think these texts have a lot to say about where we are and where we're going. I always say to every group, I know you all a little bit better since I worship here when I can, and I'm usually worshiping online if we're not here. One size doesn't fit all. I speak in some generalities. They don't all apply to you. That's fine. But it's pretty amazing talking to all these people every week and seeing what is going on and finding the stories are very similar. And the stresses and strains are very similar. And the opportunities opening up are very similar. So we're at least going to take a look at the first 2. I'll read them. The first question I'm going to ask you after I read both of the first 2 texts is, if you could question the text and it was a living thing, what question would you ask it about what these texts say? So if you could ask a question of this text, what would you say? When Jesus entered Jerusalem, the whole city was in turmoil, asking, "Who is this?" The crowds were saying, "This is a prophet, Jesus from Nazareth in Galilee." Then Jesus entered the temple and drove out all who were selling and buying in the temple. And he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold doves. Jesus said to them, "It is written, 'My house shall be called a house of prayer.' You are making it a den of robbers." The blind and the lame came to him in the temple, and he cured them. But when the chief priests and scribes saw amazing things that he did, and heard the children crying out in the temple, "Hosanna to the Son of David," they became angry and said to him, "Do you hear what these are saying?" Jesus said to them, "Yes. Have you never read, out of the mouths of infants and nursing babes, I have prepared praise for yourself." If you could ask the text one question, you've probably heard this before, but what would you ask? What would you ask? What questions do you have about this text? Excuse me. Yeah.
I would ask, why were not the chief priests and scribes amazed at the healing that took place?
Yeah, right. Yeah, the chief priests and scribes always seem to be a couple beats behind everybody else. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, why weren't they amazed? What was the problem? I think we can guess. Chief priests and scribes like to be in control, and this was probably a threat to them. But it's an excellent question. What else? What questions would you ask? Yeah, Amy.
What were the children doing there?
What were the children doing there? They should be seen and not heard, I know. Yeah, it's a good question. What were the children doing there? Although the temple was the community gathering place, among other things. But yeah, they should have been off at children's time or Sunday school or something. What else? One more? There's no right answer here. I don't have the secret up here. So I'll tell you the question I would ask. What was Jesus feeling and thinking 10 seconds before he overturned the first table? What do you think? What do you think Jesus was, what motivated it? This is very unusual in the Bible. You know, we get Jesus out in the pastures, we get him healing people as we do here. We rarely get him overturning things and saying, you know, you're a den of robbers. What do you think? What was his motivation? Again, we don't know. So we're free to speculate. Although it is on YouTube, so if you say it, it'll be, for... Yeah, there's something about how there's a track they should be on and they're not there. Yep. What else?
Well, he's wondering if they've read the scriptures.
That's right. Yeah, duh. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Have you actually, do you understand what we're about here? Yeah, absolutely. Do you think this was impetuous? Do you think he just lost his temper? I know it's hard to think Jesus doing that. I don't think probably, but who knows? Do you think he'd planned it? He'd been around the temple. He knew this was not a surprise. They didn't move in the dove selling booth the day before. Okay, he knew what the deal was. Any idea? Do you think this was premeditated? Again, we have no idea.
If he has seen it before,
He's seen it before.
been thinking about it.
Yeah, he has. Yeah, it's an interesting question. Why? Yeah.
I think he's thinking, my time is about to come to an end. I might as well do the things I'm doing.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, I think you're onto something. Jesus had an urgency about time that nobody else had. And I think it's kind of like, okay, I got 7 days left. I better make the most of them. I'm gonna major in the majors and not major in the minors. And I think that's exactly right. I think there's an urgency to Jesus here. And for some reason, it was important for him to say, this place is going to be one thing and it's not going to be another thing. It's maybe they were off track somehow. The question at the very beginning is, the whole city was already in turmoil, asking, who is this? And I wonder if those were present, if there would have been a different answer before the cleansing of the temple and after the cleansing of the temple. And as you said, there are amazing things going on, but one person's amazing is another person's threat. There seems to be here, and it certainly goes to the urgency of the moment and limited time. There seems to be a priority of Jesus saying, we're going to do some things and we're not going to do other things. We're going to be this and we're not going to be that. And if my heading is, what does Easter have to do with the future church? I am convinced, talking to a lot of folks and just seeing what's going on, that we are now in a season again of deciding the church is going to be this and we're no longer going to be that. We're gonna be what we were called to be, and the other stuff is going to have to shrink back. The nice thing about that, I mean, it doesn't mean that everything has to go away that we think of in church. It does mean the major things have to be the major things, and the minor things have to take a subordinate role. Just as in any marriage ceremony, when I talk to couples about getting married, I'm like, this is a day of rearranged priorities. Okay? All of a sudden, the person you're marrying goes to the top of the pyramid, presumably under God. But after that, and everybody else moves back one row in things. I think that's something similar to what Jesus is saying here. We're going to put in the front row what the church is for, and all the back rows have to be filled with things that are nice, perhaps, optional, maybe, but not essential. For 2,000 years, the church has asked the question, what is essential and what is not essential? And when we have been at our best in 2,000 years, we have kept working on that, and some things get relegated to the attic, and some things get promoted or kept right front and center. And I think the pandemic has probably led us into that season again. An amazing thing is happening right now. Sociologists particularly are going to be writing about and publishing about these last 2 years for the rest of all our lives. There's no question. There's already so much data about what everyone, I'm not talking about church folk now, although we are regular folk, but I'm talking about everybody, every generation, every person, whether they've ever been in a church or not, what they're saying they need now. Now, they don't sit down and tell the pollster or the researcher this, and this, but as the researchers are aggregating everything they're hearing, people are saying, I need to be more in touch with places of care. I need to be connected, and I hadn't realized how disconnected I had become. Do you know that over 50% of people say if they had a crisis, 50% of Americans, if they had a crisis today, they would have no one they know well enough to share it with? Over half. Presumably, some of those folks are in church, and presumably some of us are here. Also, 27% of Americans say they are what they consider almost permanently estranged from another family member. So people are saying they need more care. They're seeing they need more connection. They're seeing they need more community, which is more than connection. It's actually I need a group to whom I'm accountable for my life. I need a group where they're not just going to reinforce my best thoughts, but actually I'm going to have to, mix with the group and find out some things that I maybe aren't aware of. My perspective the great thing about community is, my perspective is, I would love to have a community where everyone just agreed with me. Wouldn't that be great? Except it wouldn't be. And we know that because we nurture all these things that throw us off balance. We're not going to get into the political bifurcation of our society, but I don't need to tell you anything more than that. What's happening in this society where the social fabric is so torn that people only want to consume the same media as the people that agree with them and go to the same places and congregate with the same people that only reinforce one viewpoint. People are saying care, they're saying connection, they're saying community, and I think most thrillingly, they are saying they need depth. That simply doom scrolling on a phone or just letting Netflix serve up the next episode 3 seconds after the last one ran is not fulfilling them. Who knew? Care, community, connection, depth. The wonderful thing is, at our best, the Church of Jesus Christ serves those things up every day. At our worst, and frankly, at our most mediocre, we ignore those things and instead privilege smaller, less important things, and then wonder why people don't want to come and hear what we have to say. And that means also that if people, we're learning a lot about online, people who are coming. I always used to never let ushers rope off the back pews near the side in my churches, because that's where the person who is barely able to stick a toe into worship are going to sit. They need to be in a safe place. They need to come in during the first hymn and leave during the last hymn because they're not sure if this is a safe place. Safe place is a crucial phrase for anyone who is searching in their lives. And particularly church. Churches get a bad rap, but we've kind of earned it with some of our behavior through the years. Online is the ultimate side back pew, which is wonderful. But if people who are either online or in the side back pew hear from us, come in and make our machine run better, or here, would you like to sell some doves? They're going to keep on moving. And they're going to have to settle for something less and something more shallow and watered down and cheaper. And it's not going to last, and their life is going to be in crisis again. The church has got to be ready. And I think this is the motivation of Jesus in the temple, overturning those tables and, as it says, cleansing the temple. I think Jesus said we've got to put what we do best front and center. And we have to relegate everything else to the sidelines because people are going to need this and they don't need that. And I think one of the things we've got to ask ourselves in churches is, are we ready to do that? And that's going to mean some hard choices. And it's going to mean in every church, I field a lot of calls from pastors who have made people upset or they're just upset and pastors are caught in the crossfire. One implication of this text is the gospel makes some people angry. All I can say is I don't like making people angry. It's not a good thing. It's not a good use of emotion. But I'd rather have people getting mad at the gospel of Jesus Christ than because the carpet isn't the right color or the parking lot was being repaved when they needed it. And I've been in ministry for 35 years. If you want me to make that list, I can make it. But let's move on. Okay, I'm gonna the second text. And we won't get to the third one, but that's a good reason to come on May 1st and see whether I can make anything of that. Amy told me she's preaching the passage right before this for Easter, which is the Luke text on Easter Day. So this is right after that. Now, on that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were walking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him. You probably know this is a theme of the post-Easter. Jesus is here, and no one recognizes him ever. It's just one of those things about post-Easter. We don't know quite why that's going on. And he said to them, "Why are you discussing? What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?" They stood still, looking sad. And then one of them said to him, whose name was Cleophas, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place in these days?" And Jesus said to them, "What things?" They replied, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who is a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him, but we had hoped he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the third day since these things took place. Moreover, some women in our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning, and when they did not find his body there, they came back and told us that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said." Imagine that, the women were telling the truth. "But did not see him." Then he said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all the prophets have declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer all these things and then enter into his glory?" Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures. As they came near the village to which they were going, Jesus walked ahead as if he were going on. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it's almost evening and the day is nearly over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. Their eyes were opened, and then they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. Then they said to each other, "Were our hearts not burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" The same hour they got up and returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11 and their companions gathered together. They were saying, "The Lord has risen indeed, and he's appeared to Simon." Then they told what had happened on the road and how he had been made known to them in the breaking of the bread. If you had a question to ask of this text, what would you ask? There's a lot here, and a lot that's a little unusual. What would you ask? Why didn't they recognize him? Great question. If you read on to the John passage later, same thing. He's on the seashore, they don't recognize him. What else? I want to know how he did the "I Dream of Jeannie" vanishing from sight, but that's a different thing. What else do you want to know about this?
What did he interpret to them about the things about himself in the scriptures?
Yeah.
What did he say?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I have a feeling he took him to school and said, here it is. There's some disconnect, it seems like, throughout. The disciples were not the sharpest, pencils in the barrel. I mean, can we say, bless their hearts? But somehow there was a lack of a connection between the teaching and the reality. And I think he had to say, kind of hook them up. What else? My questions are, they stood still looking sad. I get it. I mean, there's not a person in this room, I don't know you, any of you, but there's not a person in this room that doesn't know what grief feels like. And what do? We stop moving, and we're sad. And people can come and say it'll be okay, and the sun will come up tomorrow, or all the other really well-meaning things that people say, and we won't be able to hear it if we're in grief. If we were going to look at the John 21 passage, what do the disciples do? They go back fishing. What do you do in grief? You go back to the things you know, whether they're helpful or not. I have paid so many bereavement calls on homes where someone has just died, and I swear in over half the homes I would enter, what are people doing? The laundry, the dishes, or they're vacuuming. Now, why? Well, they got people coming over, yes. No, let me do something that is quantifiable. Let me touch something that will have a beginning and an end, because my world doesn't make sense right now. So I think part of it is these folks are, that is also another answer to why didn't they recognize him? They think they've lost him. And, I don't think well in grief. I don't think any of us think well in grief. I will tell you right now, and I'm thinking of the group from southern Minnesota I talked with this morning on Zoom. They were standing still looking sad. And that is not to speak badly of them. These are faithful pastors. But they are seeing just nothing growing and everything collapsing. These are good pastors. And something's going wrong. And this could be said of every profession. As Amy will know, I get on kind of a rant when I don't think pastors are special at all. But I will tell you, pastors are under such siege right now in this country. They are, teachers, principals, and pastors are considered soft targets for the latent passive-aggressive anger that is boiling in our society right now. I cannot tell you how many pastors I have heard say to me, I made a 10-cent mistake and got $100 worth of grief. So there's a reason why those pastors this morning were standing still looking sad. We don't process well, and the Church of Jesus Christ in North America right now is not processing well. So what I'm going to say, I say with tenderness and not to indict those pastors. We have Easter. We have the risen Christ. What are we sad about? Do we believe it? And I think that's really at the heart of this text. Do we really believe it? It's great to sing it, it's great to pray it, it's great to decorate for it, but do we really, truly believe it? Now, I did not say to them, I did have a pastoral care class or two in seminary, so I did not say to them today, snap out of it, you've got Easter. I get their grief, but collectively we need to say, Jesus Christ is risen today. And God's going to provide everything we need. I don't know what the Church of Jesus Christ is going to look like 3 years from now. What I do know is the Church of Jesus Christ, if it be God's will be thriving in the ways God needs it to thrive, especially if we major in the majors and not the minors. I know that because that's what the promises of God are. I also get why none of us can see it right now, because of all the collapse that's kind of coming down around us. And I think that's what's going on here. They thought it was going to be this one way, and now all of a sudden they're thrown off. And they're like, wait a minute, we didn't sign up for this. We were going to do this other thing, and then all of a sudden soldiers came and he was crucified, and I know they said he's risen, but that can't be because that doesn't happen. Okay, and so these two followers, I think, are they're trying to accommodate it all, but they can't. And so back to that passage which you helpfully raised, Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, Jesus interpreted them the things about himself. And then later they said, were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road? My question to you is, when's the last time your heart burned in a good way because of the gospel? You don't have to share that right now, but I will say, the Church of Jesus Christ had better learn how to burn again for good reasons. And I don't mean burned out. I mean burn with a zeal of excitement and joy because God is in our midst. I've heard all the jokes about Protestants being the frozen chosen, blah, blah. I'm really tired of all those, okay? What I know is if Jesus Christ is alive and well with us, we better act like it. Because again, we are being watched. And I guess that's what I want to say about both of these texts in the context of this really great congregation. You're being watched right now. Maybe we've always been watched, but we're being watched right now by people who do not know faith, do not know church, or have known church of some sort and have been ostracized or put down or kicked out, and maybe some of you too. But because somehow things didn't go right or we were in the wrong category of things. But people are watching to say, does anybody in church have a word that will save my life? And I'm kind of at a point now in my ministry and career to say that's really the only question that matters that the church answer. I don't know what else doesn't matter except, do we have a word of life that will save the life of people who right now are emerging from a pandemic so painfully lonely, so disconnected, so needing of care, and who have been choking on the shallowness of this culture? Do you know how many articles, how many gallons of ink, how many miles of text were written about Will Smith and his stupid slap? And do you know how much has been, a lot's been said about Ukraine, but not nearly enough. I don't know about you. I watched last night the news, and I couldn't believe what I saw in those cities in Ukraine was actually in 2022 in a world that we call civilized. But see, culture has this way of saying, oh no, look over there. Don't look at that. Look over there. Does the Church of Jesus, does First Presbyterian Richmond have, powered by Easter, have what it takes to offer a word of life to the people who are looking for care, community, connection, and depth? I think you do, but you know what that's going to mean. I've been around church a long time, and I've moderated more session meetings than I care to count. And I've sat in more committee meetings than I ever want to admit. And to go towards something means going away from other things. Or to raise up something means other things. They don't maybe go away, but they go to a lower rank. That's always been what the church is called to do. It is certainly what I think the church is being called to do. And I'm saying this to everybody. I'm not just saying this to you all. This is what I'm saying to people right now. I think there's a couple particular ways, and I'm going to explain those to you in 3 minutes. I am really worried. I grew up in central Illinois. I grew up in corn country. And for a while, I'm like, everyone talks about growing up in California or the East Coast. I grew up in corn and beans. But I've increasingly appreciated where I grew up because being raised in the middle part of the country with very modest people, what I learned in my hometown is you couldn't tell from a house in my hometown whether you were rich or poor in the middle because everyone was very careful not to have ostentatious appearances. Now, they did it in other ways, but not. It took me a while to figure that out. Being raised in the middle part of the country, I'm prone to moderation because I can see both sides to almost everything. And I grieve, and I know you do too, the torn social fabric we are living with right now. If it's not the church, powered by these wonderful texts, if it's not the church who's going to be, I don't want the church to be the only group in society mending the social fabric. That would be a pretty skewed fabric. But we better be one of them who else is better equipped than the Church of Jesus Christ to go in and put some things a little lower in the priority list, like politics, and raise up that we need to have a fabric of care, community, connection, and depth? Who, if we're not going to do it, if we people who say we follow Jesus are not willing to do that, who's going to do it? I think there are other groups that can do it. I know people are studying it and want to do it, and I would gladly take their contribution. But I think at our best, again, the church is a place where we come in with lots of loyalties. I could start right now, UNC or Duke. I mean, no, the answer, of course, is UVA. So that's easy. Republican, Democrat, vax, no, you know, I don't have to. Okay. At our best, and this is what I see in these texts, at our best, the Church of Jesus Christ says our loyalty is to Jesus. And every other loyalty can still be important in our lives. I'm not saying it's not, but it's less important than that. And that's our unity. We have the ability to offer this to this society, or we can just keep seeing the social fabric be torn and torn and torn and torn more, and no one's going to step into the breach. A friend of mine long ago said, it's one of the, it's one of the 2 or 3 things that stay with me my whole ministry. Human beings can choose to be right or to grow. I think in these 2 Emmaus disciples, they had to choose in this moment to grow, and that's why their hearts were burning. I think it's time for the Church of Jesus Christ and the society to say, we are going to grow, and we're not going to give away key value. Again, back to what is essential. That's the first text, what's essential. But we are going to commit ourselves to growing and healing and mending instead of always having to be right all the time. If we don't do it along with others, I don't know who will. And that to me is the biggest gift for Easter for the future of the church. Or we can keep going the way we have. Okay, I'm 1 minute over. And that will not be good. The Protestant church in North America has been declining for 64 years. 64 years we've been in decline. It wasn't that great 2 years ago before the pandemic. It's time to act like Easter is real, and these texts are going to help us there. Thank you. That's a shorthand thing, but I hope that's something.
Thank you so much, Mark. I've never said amen in my head so many times. 45 minutes.
You can only do that during Lent.
Thank you so much for making the effort to be here and to drive over from Charlottesville, and hopefully you'll get home before the rain starts. Are there any questions? Does anybody want to ask Mark anything?
I'm sorry, there's a lot of shortened stuff.
I just want to say, the pain with the Ukraine
Yeah.
that everybody's feeling, sometimes I just can't turn on the TV
I know.
unless it's a
Yeah.
basketball game or
Yeah.
something. And then there's just so many, and I love our church, and it's not just our church, but there's just so many demands. We need to do this in Nicaragua, we need to do this in Richmond, we need to do this. It's just so many. You're just being pulled every minute.
Yeah. Yeah, we're being pulled in so many directions. There's so many needs. That's absolutely true. And not all of us need to do everything. We need to pick a lane and do it. I've got to trust that if I decide I'm called to homeless ministry, there are people in this room and around the world who are going to go toward other things. Okay? I think I can get frozen by all the needs rather than saying I'm going to pick one path and go for it and let somebody else take the rest of it. So it's hard. The Ukraine thing, I mean, we like to think we're civilized, and then I see bodies on the street, and I'm like, what world? That could have been, I have a 24-year-old daughter, and she's like, this is only a 24. She goes, was that what it's like in World War II? I'm like, I wasn't born then. Thank you very much. But I said, yeah, from what I've seen, that's what it feels like. It just feels horrible. So, But too much need doesn't mean we don't need to do something. I am always for do one small thing and then see where that leads rather than wait for it. The perfect is almost always the enemy of the good, especially in church. So, anything else?
Risk is a good example of that tonight. So many
Yeah.
people in our church
There
are,
you go.
they are very passionate about it, and I think that's wonderful. And,
Yeah.
as you said, we're all part of the body of Christ, and the ear doesn't do the same thing that the eye does, so.
The church where I met Amy in Denver, we had a homeless shelter, and we focused on rehabilitating men who had not fallen so far down that we could help them with job training and get them back into the workforce and get them back into a house. And we were criticized by the homeless community in Denver because we were catering to the upper echelon of homeless. I was tempted to say, yeah, the double parking of the BMWs outside the shelter is really a problem. I'm sorry. But my answer always was, I'm grateful for everyone. The rescue mission we can all do this and we don't have to do it all. Pick a lane and do it. And just assume that others can pick up the rest of it.
Right. Blair, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, when you said before the sort of a dream of Jeannie
Yeah.
step, I kept going back to that passage and thinking how easy it would have been for Jesus to stay
Yeah,
once their
right.
eyes were open
Yep.
to
That's
offer,
great.
offer the care and
Yeah,
the comfort.
yeah.
And by vanishing, it really did put it back on them. So
That's wonderful,
now
Blair.
what are you going to do?
That is
Do you think
wonderful.
that was the
That
motivation?
absolutely. And that is such a wonderful comment that he could have stayed, he didn't. Mark ends with the women leave afraid and the curtain comes down. But the other three gospels are all the story of where Jesus isn't. And all of them say he's gone on ahead of you, go find him. I think the word, if we had done John 21, that's what I was going to talk about. The word of the church is he's not here, so go find where he's active and work with him. That's fabulous because there's never an account of the Easter morning where they say, there is the one in John where they take a hold of his feet, but again, it's this mysterious person, and he's like, I got to get out of here. It's always like we're going on. Even in Emmaus, he acted as if he was going on. There's this motion there that's important. Yeah. So.
Any other comments? Great. Well,
Great.
thank you
Thanks.
again so
Good to be
much,
with
Mark,
you.
for
Yeah.
being here. And thank y'all for being here. We'll be excited to hear about risk tonight. Thank y'all.
Thank